All right, here we go. We have legendary actor, director, producer, Bill Duke is in the building.
Thanks for having me, Vlad.
Hey, man, ever since we had lunch a few years ago, I've been wanting to do this, and I'm glad we finally got a chance to sit down and pull this off. And I'm such a huge fan
Thank you.
of what you've been doing for such a long time.
Thank you. Again, I said, forgive my lip because it's numb from the dentist I just came from, but I'll talk.
That's a true professional right there.
Done.
You know what I'm saying? A lot of people would have canceled. But Bill Duke is like, nah, I got an appointment. We're gonna make this happen.
Not a problem, brother.
No doubt. Well, let's go ahead and start from the very beginning. This is our first interview. So you grew up in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Poughkeepsie, New York. That's right.
Okay. And this was the 30s, 40s?
1943.
Okay, so the 40s and 50s, that's when you were a kid.
That's right.
Okay. And a fairly low-income family. Both your parents were together, though, right?
My both parents stayed together, second and third grade educations. They never took welfare or social assistance of any kind. They were very proud. My father worked 3 jobs and mother worked 2.
That's amazing, but they only
7
had a
days a week.
second and third grade education. Oh, why is that? Why did they drop out of school so early?
In those days, we're talking about segregation. They grew up in the South. They saw lynchings. They called nigger barbecues, where they would spin people that were alive on pits until they were dead and dehydrated, and they would hold up pieces of their bodies and smile, hundreds of people. So they came from a very oppressed society. My father from Orange, Virginia, my mother from West Point, Mississippi. So escaping that oppression was their main focus. They wish they had focused on education, and they insisted that my sister and I be educated, but they had other options. They didn't have the same options.
So, okay, let me just do the timeline here. So you were born in the 40s. So your parents, I guess, were born in the 20s?
Not only the 20s, but 1901, 1905.
Okay. So they had relatives, and they were living in the Deep South. So they had, I guess, grandparents that were still slaves?
Their grandparents and great-grandparents. Slavery was a recent thing for them. But more than slavery, the inheritance of slavery in the sense that when they were going to church on a Sunday, say it was raining, and say they were on the sidewalk, if a white family came their direction, in the opposite direction, they had to step into the mud and bow their heads until the white family passed, then get back on the sidewalk and walk to church. And every time a white family passed toward them, they had to step into the mud and bow their heads.
Wow, right. Because even after, slavery officially ended, then the Jim Crow laws came in and...
You said a very important thing, officially.
Yeah. Okay, so your parents really just saw some horrific things.
They saw bad things, man.
Yeah. Okay. So you grew up in Poughkeepsie. So at one point they made their way north.
Yes.
Okay, and they settled in Poughkeepsie. So, a lot of people that grew up in various neighborhoods that I've talked to, some of them say, well, I didn't really grow up around a lot of white people, or I've had some negative, some positive experiences with white people. But in your situation, you actually said that you hated white people early on.
Well, when I was called nigger, spook, coon, all kinds of baboon, on the bus, in school, etc. And my first day in kindergarten, I was called nigger and blackie. I remember coming home crying and went to the bathroom and tried to take, they used to have Babo cleanser at those days, and wipe the black off of my skin. I thought maybe if I could do that and people would love me more, and then I was gonna drink some bleach in the bathroom. My mother came in just in time, and because I thought the bleach would whiten me. And I was like, I was 7 or 8 years old. I didn't know any better. But it was a time when you really were traumatized by the way you were treated as a child, and it's not easy to get over. But what happened was in high school, for example, I met some friends that were white and didn't care what color I was. And then Mrs. Walker, my English teacher in high school, I was awkward. I have she's called dyslexia. I don't know if you know what dyslexia is. And I couldn't communicate very well, but I memorized most of Roget's thesaurus. But I used to write in a journal because I was not good at communicating, and I wrote poems and I wrote, feelings. I used to write in her class while she was teaching, and she told me not to do it twice, and I did it the third time. She took my journal, and I was upset. I hated her. I said, there's this white woman going again and being discriminatory against a black person. The end of that year, as I'm leaving the class, she says, Duke, stop. And so I said, what do you want, Miss Walker? She said, sit down. I said, here we go. She goes under her desk and she pulls out my original journal that she took from me and a book. It was a national poetry contest. She had entered some of my poems into the contest, and I had won some things. And that confused me because this is a white woman that cared enough about me to enter my poems into a contest, and I won. And when I tried to thank her, she said, don't thank me, I believe in you. That was one of the first times I had a mental spin, let's say.
Well, I'm going with the timeline real quick. You were born what year?
1943.
So you were 12 years old when Emmitt Till happened.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I want to get emotional, but how can you forget it? Did you ever see the pictures?
Yeah.
After they took him from the lake? Looks like a monster, face bloated and half gone. Because they said that he's like a child, right? And that he whistled or something at a white woman. And do you know that years later, she came forth and said he never did it?
Yeah. Yeah.
He died because of that.
Yeah. And it's one thing for us to read about the story now in 2018, but you were actually there when the newspapers, because his mother, which must have been like the hardest thing in the world, she insisted on an open casket funeral and insisted that people take photos of what her son looked like.
Yes.
So everyone could see the type of horrors that was happening in the Deep South.
Yes.
Yeah, and this
It was a pretty it was a difficult time.
Yeah. Yeah, but it did bring a lot of attention to that situation.
Yes.
And that was happening all the time. There was not just one Emmitt Till. Emmitt Till was happening all the time. Yeah.
A lot of people were murdered. A lot of people were hanged, lynched. And they had actually barbecues of black people. It was a Holocaust, our Holocaust, other than slavery and coming over on the ships. But it's amazing to me the resilience of oppressed people,
Yeah.
It's like some people just give up, but others, my parents had a certain resolve. My parents taught my sister and I something from the age of like 5 and 6 until we left the house. And they had this phrase which I never forgot. And they said, you're no better than anybody else, but nobody else is better than you. And when you take that in from your parents and understand it, no matter what anybody says to you, you remember that. And that was salvation for us.